folks, welcome back to another episode of Coffee, Tea, and Crime. Today's episode, 4-Day Spree. The evildoer we're going to be talking about today, he started out pretty young being a bad fella. Of course, if you read about his upbringing, it's no wonder he went bad, because he sure got taught to be bad. Before it's all said and done, this fella and two other people that are under his spell, they're going to go on a 4-day crime spree covering 3 states. And 4 people are going to be dead. Now, before that 4-day crime spree began, this suspect was in all kinds of meanness and mischief. And he took some lives and destroyed some other lives while he was still a young man. 1968, he traveled from his hometown of Springfield, Missouri. And he did an armed robbery in the great state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma didn't take too kindly to that. They got laws against armed robbery. So he was arrested before he could get back to Missouri, and Oklahoma gave him 10 years in the state prison. Now, being how the correctional institutes are in this country, he did 5 years and he got back out, and he skedaddled back to Missouri. Now, he wasn't out too long there in 1973. They had a warrant out for him because he stabbed a fella and he strangled a woman. Didn't strangle her to death, but it wasn't for lack of trying. He used a telephone cord on her, but she survived, and so did this victim. Now, while he's got that warrant, he goes by to see a fella that he didn't like much. So he got into it with this victim. Fella's name was Claude Day, and his son was there as well. Fella named Coffer Day. So they got into it, had an argument led to a fight led to a shooting. Our suspect, he shot the fella he didn't like, shot him in the neck, but now he survived. And now, unfortunately, his son, grown son, who was involved in this fisticuffs, he was shot and killed. Now, right after that shooting, he stopped at a house. He didn't know the people at the house, but it didn't matter to him. He took them hostage and their 6-year-old daughter, and he took them with him. Don't know where he was going or what his plans were. I don't think he did either. So he's kidnapped this family, and he held on to them for 11 hours. Now they're out driving around. So our suspect decides it's time to eat. So he takes this family inside this little cafe. He's gonna buy everybody some dinner. Well, now the woman, knowing that things are just going to get bad and that he's going to kill them all for sure. So while they're in there having this dinner, she's able to get a message or whisper a plea for help to the waitress. And then she goes one step further. This poor woman, who's not going to let this fella kill her and her child and her husband, she grabs a steak knife there off the table, attacks the suspect, cuts him in the face, and there's a big brouhaha inside the cafe, and they're able to hold this fella down with the help of some citizens to call the police, and our suspect gets arrested. Now, our suspect gets 3 counts of kidnapping, and he's sentenced to 30 years in prison. He also gets charged with first-degree murder for killing the son of that fella that he didn't like. But he took a plea bargain on that, and he did manslaughter, and he had 10 years added to his 30-year sentence. The math I learned, 30 plus 10, that's 40 years. Now, on top of that, they had a first-degree robbery charge. He got 10 years for that, but now that was a concurrent sentence to what he already got sentenced to. So he still got 40 years to do, you reckon. you figured. And they sent him to the Missouri State Penitentiary. Now, in 1989, Missouri sent him to a halfway house there in Kansas City, Missouri. So you figure he's done right around 15 years. Now he's at this halfway house and he falls in love with this young woman at that same halfway house. She was there in a program for drug addicts. There's a young fella there that he takes under his wing, and it's now January of 1990. Come to find out that the young fella he's taken under his wing, they're getting ready to take him to a more secure jail facility. So the two of them and this young lady, they flee the jurisdiction. Now the suspect told the young fella and this young girl now that we're going to be committing robberies and we may have to do some murders. According to that didn't dissuade them from going with them. So our suspect steals a van and the trio they're on the road. Now their plan is to either go to California or Florida, one or the other. So east or west. And now the first thing to do is the suspect, he drives them in that stolen van down to Springfield, where he's from. And he stops by his mama's house and she gives him some money. Now the young fella, his daddy knew a fella up in Clinton, Missouri. So they decide to turn around, go back up north, and stop in Clinton, Missouri. So they stop by this fella's house. They're in there shooting the breeze and having a drink. Well, this poor fella named Frank Merrifield, he's in there with his stepson, Ray Donahue. They're all in there having a good time. Well, Frank shows them his gun collection. And now that's a bad sign. It was already a bad sign because they didn't show up there to be hospitable. But now once our suspect sees that gun collection, he just decides it's time to take sterner measure. So he uses the fella's pearl-handled .22 caliber pistol. He executes both Frank and Ray with that .22 caliber pistol. So now they took money and they took that .22 pistol and a .38 that was also in the gun collection, and they head out. So they drove southwest and went through Kansas and then into Oklahoma. Now our suspect decides they've been in that stolen van too long, so they're going to stop somewhere, try to get them another vehicle. Now they went through Tulsa and into Sand Springs. They just couldn't find anything. So then they're heading out further west and they're going to find them a house they can take over. That was suspect's words. He liked taking over a house. It's known as home invasion. So they're traveling west and now they're out in the country. They just can't find the right one. Well, they get into Kay County, Oklahoma, and they're near the town of Tonkawa, Oklahoma. They pull up to this farmhouse, and this fella, he comes out to see what's going on. His name is Richard Denny. And they ask old Richard for some directions. Now, the suspect had told his young follower that he's going to do all the dirty work on this one, but he just can't do it. So our suspect, he pulls out his .38 pistol and he puts it on poor Richard. He forces him back into the house. Now his wife Virginia is sitting there at the kitchen table. That poor older couple, they're begging the suspect and his followers not to hurt them, that they can have whatever they want. They tell them, say, look, we don't even have a phone. We're not going to call anybody. And again, the suspect asks his young buddy, he goes, "You want to kill this old couple?" And he says, "Nope, I do not." So our suspect, for no other reason other than meanness, he executes that couple. He takes $61, a pocket knife, and some cigarettes. And that's the price of life in the eyes of this suspect. So now they take Mr. Denny's old pickup truck and they head down into Texas. And they get to a town there in Texas called Canadian. So now they decided, our suspect has, they're going to have to get them a new vehicle. They're going to find them a house. So they're riding around in this neighborhood, and there's a woman that lives in that neighborhood, and she's behind them. Well, they're driving real slow looking. She pulls into her house, and she gets out and goes in, and she's glancing out the window because there's something about that truck and the people inside of it that's kind of got her on edge. So she watches out her window, and sure enough, that truck comes back around through the block again. Well, she does the right thing. She calls the police. Now, by the time the police get out there, they done made the block in front of her house 3 times. Well, now a deputy gets them stopped. And while he's talking to them, he knows something's up because the suspect, he didn't have any kind of ID. And what the suspect's saying and what the other 2 people are saying don't make any sense. So he calls for backup, and the sheriff gets out there. And they get everybody out of the truck, and then they see one of the pistols there in the floorboard. Then they find another pistol in there. So they arrest all 3 of them. Now the sheriff there, he calls the sheriff up there in Oklahoma, in K County, because now that proof of registration for the truck, that's where it's showing it's registered out of. So the sheriff up in Oklahoma, he sends some people out to the Denny's house, and sure enough, they're dead. Now, of course, after that, they done found the bodies up in Clinton, Missouri as well. So now that young fella and that young lady, well, they cut deals to avoid the death penalty. And the young fella now, he gets 2 counts of first-degree murder. He gets 2 concurrent life sentences. Well, concurrent means he's just going to do one of them. Now, the young girl, she takes a deal of accessory after the fact, and she gets 15 years in prison. She actually gets 2 counts, but they're to be served concurrently, so she only gonna have to do one of those 15 years. Now, both of them testified against the suspect, and the jury convicted our suspect of 2 counts of first-degree murder. And on May 27th, 2003, our suspect is executed by lethal injection at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary in McAlester, Oklahoma.